These are some of the most gruesome cases of people getting into a stranger's car and never making it back alive. That moment, that very decision to go somewhere that changes everything. Out there, when you're moved into an isolated spot, your odds of survival nosedive. And there's one thing that the attacker has on you, the upper hand. No witnesses, no interruptions, no escape. Just them, you, and whatever sick thing they have planned. Your best bet for survival is right there at the point of confrontation. Just say no, or resist. You might have to fight back, but this is all worth it considering the options, because once you're in the vehicle, your chances dwindle exponentially. Hi, I'm Victor, and today we're going into some of the most disturbing cases from around the world. Some cases remain unsolved to this very day, and somewhere out there, someone still knows what really happened.
Yo, where are we going? No, this is a... Are you f***ing kidding me? You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we? No, we're not.
What you just heard is the last known recording of Amber Tucaro. Edmonton, Canada. Police released this audio in 2012, and many believe that this young Indigenous woman who vanished a year and a half earlier can be heard on the call with a man who they believe is her killer. You see, in August 2010 in Alberta, Canada, Amber, who's 20 years old, she's living with her 14-month-old son, Jacob. They're living together in Fort McMurray, a small city in northern Alberta, with her mother, Tutsi. They're members of the Mikisew Cree First Nation. Life hasn't been easy for Amber. In fact, she spent a few short periods in a women's shelter. So on Tuesday, August 17th, Amber and Jacob board a one-way WestJet flight to Edmonton. Amber made this trip with a friend called Evangeline. Amber knew Evangeline from the women's shelter, and a few weeks earlier, they became good friends. Now call it women's intuition, but Amber's mom, Tutsi, had a bad feeling about this trip and didn't want her to go. But Amber reassured her she would be gone for just 2 days. After a short flight, Amber, her son, and her friend checked in just 2 kilometers or slightly over 1 mile from the airport at the Nisku Place Motel, likely because this was a cheaper option than staying downtown. On August 18th, after their first night at the motel, Amber decided to leave it around 8 o'clock that evening, perhaps to get some food. She left Jacob in the care of her friend Evangeline. She was last seen leaving with an unknown man, presumably hitching a ride with him as she got into his vehicle, though witnesses cannot recall exactly what vehicle he drove. According to her mom, she and Amber are in regular contact throughout the day, but for some reason on that day, Amber stopped responding. This worried her greatly because it wasn't like her. Eventually, she got so worried, she managed to get a hold of Amber's friend Evangeline and called her. But Evangeline reassured Tutsi that Amber was in the motel sleeping with Jacob. This, of course, was a lie, but Evangeline just wanted to calm her mom down a bit and wait for Amber to eventually come back. However, Tutsi's intuition was right. The very next day, on August 19th, Evangeline contacted Amber's mother, letting her know that Amber still had not returned from Edmonton, and finally revealed that Amber had left in the middle of the night. Tutsi immediately knew something was wrong because Amber would never leave her son unattended for so long with someone she barely knew, friend or not. She contacted the police, and specifically Canada's RCMP, who handle these cases, but the RCMP didn't take her seriously and told Amber's mother that she was likely just out partying and to call back within 24 hours. But what's ridiculous here is that when they finally opened the case 24 hours later, they closed it again 8 days later. On September 4th, RCMP announced that they had no reason to believe that Amber was in danger and that they, quote, knew she was still in the Edmonton area. I cannot imagine what Amber's mom must be going through at this time, let alone her son missing his mother. It took over a month after Amber's vanishing for the case to be reopened on September 23rd, 2010. It's unlikely that any investigation was even done before this. And what's even more shocking is that it took the authorities 4 months just to interview her mother. The investigation seemed thin, almost empty, except for one crucial piece of evidence. And honestly, that might be because of how carelessly things were handled from the very beginning. There were delays in reporting, critical missteps, and moments that can only be described as complete failures. The RCMP even destroyed Amber's belongings. items that had never been properly examined or processed. There were no policemen, guard dogs, search parties, helicopters, none of that stuff. No one was out there looking for her. And perhaps the most shocking of all, Evangeline, the last confirmed person to see Amber alive, was never interviewed. Years went by with almost no progress. It's almost like the police didn't care. And the entire time, Amber's mom was all over social media trying to get justice for her daughter. It took until 2019 for the RCMP to publicly apologize for the way they handled this case. But let's look at what they actually did. On August 28, 2012, 2 years after Amber Takaro vanished, the RCMP did something they had never done before in a case like this. They released a portion of her final phone call to the public. The audio infuriated the public because it's clear she's not going where she wanted to go. And the police did nothing when they sat on this for about 2 years. Only about a minute of the 17-minute call has ever been made public, but that small fragment speaks enough. In it, she can be heard asking one, possibly two men, "Where are you taking me?" She's scared and she doesn't trust the answers she's been getting. She's even heard saying, "You better not take me anywhere I don't want to go." And near the end of the clip, Amber demands the driver to stop the car. And his reply is strange, something about gravel, before the call cuts off without warning.
Where are we by?
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north to Beaumont. Yo, where are we going?
Just
No, this is a... Are you f***ing kidding me? You better not take me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we? No, we're not. Then where the f*** are these roads going to?
50th Street.
50th Street. Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Yo, where are we going?
50th Street.
50th Street.
50th Street.
East, right?
East.
Over now.
Travel.
That's the last time anyone heard Amber's voice. Now, statistically, the potential killers, if that's what happened to Amber, knew this, because Amber, being an Indigenous woman, is far more likely to face violence, even death. These are just the stats coming out of Canada. As a precaution, Tootsie had always told Amber, if you ever take a ride, remember to call someone and keep them on the line.
I always tell Amber, like, don't hitchhike, don't go with strangers, or if you're in a cab, even if you have to pretend like you're on your cell phone, like, do it just so the person will think you're talking to somebody and won't do nothing to you.
And this is exactly what Amber did. The call that you heard was a call placed to one of her brothers, who happened to be incarcerated at the Edmonton Remand Center at the time. And because he was in the prison system, the call that she placed was automatically recorded. Something Amber made this call in error, that she should have called her mom. But no, Amber made this on purpose. Because she knew the call would be automatically recorded, she wanted to leave a trace. Just 4 days after the call was publicly released, partial skeletal remains were discovered by horseback riders on a rural property near Leduc, which included finding a skull. These remains were quickly identified as Amber's. Her cause of death was not released to the public. And eerily, these remains were found just 17 minutes drive away from Amber's last known location, the same length as Amber's call. Despite the driver repeatedly telling Amber they were heading to 50th Street, main street that runs through Leduc that would eventually turn into Edmonton, it appears Tucaro's remains were found near Range Road 241 and Highway 623. It's likely the killer drove her down Township Road 502, turned right onto Highway 814, and then left onto Roley View. And that's where Amber was likely shortly killed after the call ended. The killer likely either killed her in his vehicle and dumped her body in the field, or killed her outside, and once she was done, disposed of her as trash. It's unfortunate that the Canadian police will not reveal what happened, likely because it covers their own embarrassing inaction in this case, and the absolute hell Amber's mom, her son, and her friends and family went through. And despite 14 years passing since Amber Tucaro's disappearance, kidnapping, and murder, it seems the police have identified No suspects or persons of interest in this case, just the phone call and the voice she heard. And this has caused speculation to run wild. Amber's family even at one point believe that Evangeline knows more about Amber's disappearance than she's letting on, and she could have possibly been involved. This is due to the inconsistent stories that they say Evangeline gave about Amber's whereabouts. Why did she lie to Tootsie that Amber was sleeping in the motel with her son? Perhaps acting early would have saved Amber. However, to be fair, it's not exactly Evangeline's fault that she wasn't interviewed for months by the police. Then, in January 2020, an anonymous tip was received by a man who made several posts on social media stating that he believed his father had murdered Amber Tucaro, as well as several other women in Canada and the US, dating back as far as the 1970s. He claimed to have submitted this information to various authorities, and that him and several other family members identified the man on the phone call as his father. He stated that they lived rurally in the greater Edmonton area, and his father had a history of violence. He also said he shared these recordings of his father with Amber's relatives, who also reported that they sounded similar.
Oh, that's just called to see how everything's going. Give me a call back. I have to leave about 10 anyway. Tell everybody I love them. Hope everything's okay. Talk to you later. Love you. Bye.
Let me know if you think they sound like the same person. And as promising as this sounds, it seems to have gotten nowhere. Because when he reported this to the RCMP and all the cases his father could have been involved in, the RCMP turned him down, saying that many of these cases were already solved. Now that too is a scary proposition. Either his father was not involved and the right person was apprehended, or the police just gave several passes to a potential serial killer. And speaking of serial killers, beginning in 2015, police admitted they were considering the possibility of a serial killer operating in the Leduc area. First, there were at least 15 unsolved cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in the greater Edmonton area. More damningly though, between 2002 and 2015, 4 different Indigenous women's bodies were found in a small rural area near Leduc, including Amber Takaro. All the women except Amber worked as adult workers, which statistically made them one of the most vulnerable women and more likely to get into a vehicle with a stranger. Just some of these victims are like Dolores Brawler, who was 33 years old, last seen hitchhiking on May 12, 2004, reported missing on 2005. Her skull was found in 2015 near Roley View. Then there's Edna Bernard, who was 28, a mother of 6. She was last seen in a vehicle with unknown people on September 22, 2002, and the next day her body was found in a field. She'd been beaten, strangled, and set on fire. Then there's Katie Ballantyne, 40, also a mother, reportedly missing on May 5, 2003. Her decomposed remains were found 2 months later on a farm near Township Road 500. All of these women have one thing in common. They were Indigenous, they were all hitchhiking, and they were all found in the same small area. For a while, police thought Bernard and Ballantyne might have been killed by the same person. One suspect, Thomas Svikla. He was considered, but he'd been serving a life sentence since 2007. Finally, in 2015, the RCMP said they would conduct more searches for bodies in the area, but one has to wonder, what if there are more remains still undiscovered? The remains of a non-Indigenous woman involved in adult work on the streets were also found around the same time as Dolores Brawler's. Corey Ottenbridge. She was last seen on May 9, 2004 in Edmonton, and given that she disappeared within days of Dolores, they might have been killed around the same time and dumped in close proximity. The online community did come forward with a name, a man called Pat, who's from an area of Alberta just about an hour northwest of Leduc. And while not a formal person of interest, his name often comes up in discussions about Amber's case because Pat is a registered sex offender. After his release from prison in early 2000s for a sex crime involving a minor, the RCMP issued a public safety warning about him. He has a criminal record involving sex workers and choking, and he allegedly lured victims through newspaper ads offering ranch work. Online, people shared their own experiences with Pat, describing his creepy ads and the various aliases that he used on his ranch. He would offer people room and board in exchange for work, and the most recent ads were posted as early as January 2022, and at least 3 women have come forward claiming that that voice on that phone call is Pat's. February 1st, 2012. It was a cold winter night in Anchorage, Alaska. It's 8 p.m. in a small coffee shop called Common Grounds. It's a quiet night for an 18-year-old, Samantha Koenig, who's working through her shift alone as the sole staff member 30 minutes before closing time. It was a quiet shift with no one around, and the parking lot outside was covered with fresh snow. Then, a customer walks in, a man in thick winter gear who ordered an Americano. Samantha prepared the brew. Poured and covered the lid on the cup, and handed it over. This would be the last transaction she would ever make. She just didn't know it yet. Fast forward, and it's 8:30 p.m. Her boyfriend, Dwayne, arrived to pick her up, as he usually would after her shift. But he found that the coffee shop was closed, the parking lot empty, and Samantha nowhere to be found. He texted her a lot, waited even longer, no response. Uneasy, he thought perhaps she went home earlier to her dad's, and there's been some kind of miscommunication, at least to avoid his own intrinsic negative thoughts. When he arrived at her dad's place, her father James answered the door. Samantha wasn't home and never called her either. Nearly in panic, when suddenly Dwayne's phone received a message. It was Samantha. She said she needed some time to think, some time away, and would return in a few days. Everyone thought this was extremely out of character. She never indicated feeling stressed or wanting to get away. Both men thought over it for a while and decided not to take any chances. The next day, on February 2nd, they went to the Anchorage Police Department to report her missing. Police first contacted the shop owner, Michelle Duncan, and she confirmed her morning employee had found the shop in complete disarray. She hadn't had any communication from Samantha either, except for a text message that she just had a bad day and was leaving town for the weekend. Initially, investigators considered this a robbery gone wrong. And where could she go alone? She had no vehicle, and the outside temperature was dangerously low. No, she must have left with someone, or worse, abducted. Then came the surveillance footage, grainy and obscured, but it changed everything. The footage showed Samantha complying with an armed man, handing over money, and then being subdued and led away. The Anchorage police called in the FBI for additional help, because despite the low image quality, this was clearly an abduction. While Samantha had no criminal history or a reason for anyone to abduct her, the fact is, her job, alone and late at night, left her in an isolated and vulnerable position. The search for Samantha gained national attention. Her father James rallied the public. They put up flyers, search efforts, donations poured in, but there was nothing but silence for weeks. Until February 24th, James received a chilling and creepy message from Samantha's phone. Connor Park sign under pic of Albert, ain't she purty. James and Dwayne raced to the park. They found the sign, and beneath it, a Ziploc bag. Inside was a ransom note and a photo of Samantha holding a newspaper dated February 13th. A proof of life. She was alive, at least up to February 13th, and that gave the men hope. But something was odd in that photo. Her hair and makeup were different. Her eyes were blank. Something felt off. The note demanded $30,000 deposited into Samantha's bank account. In return, she'd be released in 6 months. Her bank account was credited, but this was part of the FBI's scheme to see where the money led them. And ATM withdrawals followed. First in Anchorage, 3 times. Each time was too quick for agents to intercept the suspect. Then, nothing until March 7th. New withdrawals followed, spanning across different states: Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. The suspect was always one step ahead of the FBI, and surveillance footage from the ATMs showed a man in large sunglasses and a bulky coat. He drove a white Ford Focus. On March 19th, a Texas Ranger spotted the vehicle outside a hotel. This time, he wasn't getting away. They stopped the vehicle, and the man who emerged seemed calm, cooperative. He had a driving license issued in Alaska. Bingo, this was their prime suspect. A man with the name Israel Keyes, age 34, hometown, Anchorage. He wasn't stopped by the Texas Ranger who spotted him outside the hotel. No, he was actually stopped for speeding. When he handed over his ID and Rangers searched the vehicle, in the trunk they found Samantha Koenig's belongings, including her cell phone and debit card, and a pistol. Everything seemed to match the suspect in the ATM footage at the coffee shop, at the ATMs withdrawing money, and with Samantha's belongings, this was their man.
Well, I was going to tell you that, but we're investigating kidnapping. Okay. You're from the last first. Why is that? Kidnapping where? I don't know where you're from. State of Alaska.
It's now March 13th, and in Lufkin, Texas, Israel Keyes sits in the interrogation room. He's polite, composed, and almost unnervingly calm. To the investigators, finding Samantha was of the utmost urgency, but they had to approach this delicately to keep the suspect calm and talking. When they eventually confronted him about his car, the ATM footage, and Samantha's debit card and phone, he didn't flinch. Then, little by little, he started to talk. And what unfolded was truly horrifying. This was a predator with many secrets. Keyes admitted to sending that ransom photo. The only problem, Samantha was already dead when it was taken. In fact, he admitted to killing her just hours after abducting her. His original plan was simply to rob the coffee shop, but when he watched Samantha make his coffee, he decided he was going to abduct her. He said he began by putting his hands on his pistol, and when she handed him over his Americano, he very calmly pulled out his gun and pointed it right at her. He first ordered her to hand over all the money and then to turn off the lights. When he noticed that she was cooperating and there was no one around, he decided to take it a step further. He climbed through the window and tied her hands behind her back and shoved a wad of napkins in her mouth. Then, with the gun pressed against her back, he walked her out of the shack and towards his pickup truck. The entire time, his pistol pressed into her back. When he reached the car, he opened the passenger side door and pushed her inside before shutting it and walking over to the driver's side. He ensured her if she tried to scream or alert anyone, he was going to kill her. He took her phone, her credit cards, and he sent the first text message to Duane, stating that she would be going off for a few days and to let her dad know. He then took out the batteries from her phone and threw them away so the cell towers wouldn't pick them up. He kept her cooperation by telling her this was simply a temporary kidnapping until her father sent her money. Samantha insisted that they weren't rich and there's no way her father could afford to send a lot, but Israel told her not to worry. He then drove her to his home, ordered her into the back seat, and covered her with tarp to obscure her from anyone walking by. Then he walked in to his girlfriend and 10-year-old daughter. It's unclear what he did inside, whether he kissed his daughter goodnight or simply got the blindfold that he used after to cover Samantha's eyes and walk her towards his shed. Once inside, he bound her by a rope, especially around her neck, and then turned on some music to drown out any kind of sounds she might make. He left again and returned after some time. This time he told Samantha that her father had paid the ransom and she would be released. Samantha was relieved. She leaned forward and let out a sigh, but this was all a lie and the kind of manipulation tactic that he used to gain her cooperation for what was to come next. As she let her guard down further, he pushed her back against the wall, bound her even tighter than before, and essayed her before finally strangling her to death. After this, he walked back into his house, woke up his 10-year-old daughter, and simply explained to her that they were going on a 2-week cruise. It wasn't until he arrived back on February 17th that he unwrapped Samantha's body and thought she looked pretty lively enough to pose for a photo. She had actually been frozen in his shed for over 2 weeks. He thawed her body under a heater. He sat her up, fixed her hair, did her makeup, he sewed her eyelids open, and took a photo of her holding a copy of Anchorage Daily News. And this was the sick proof of life photo that he left in the park for her father and boyfriend to see, and then dismembered her. He led investigators to Matansuka Lake, a quiet spot just outside Anchorage. Under the ice, weighted down by fishing wire and chains, they found what was left of Samantha Koenig. But Samantha wasn't his first. Not even close. Over many months, Kies slowly drip-fed information about his other victims. He told the investigators that he'd been a serial killer for over a decade, a methodical one.
Right now, there is no one who knows me, or who has ever known me, who knows anything about me, really. They know they're going to tell you something that does not line up with anything I tell you because I'm two different people, basically. And the only person who knows about what I'm telling you, the kind of things I'm telling you, is me.
How long have you been two different people?
Long time. 14 years.
He traveled across the US, targeting victims at random. He buried kill kits years in advance, buckets that were filled with guns, zip ties, and cash, waiting for the right moment. He didn't know any of his victims beforehand. He chose people with no connection to him, people he thought who wouldn't be missed right away. He avoided digital trails, no phones, no internet searches, no pattern that could be recognized. He simply called this a hobby. In Vermont, he admitted to killing Bill and Lorraine Currier in 2011. He broke into their home, kidnapped them, and then murdered them in an abandoned farmhouse. Their bodies were never found. He hinted at more, at least 11 victims, possibly even more. He claimed that he started killing sometime between 2001 and 2005, possibly even earlier. He seemed to be enjoying these conversations with these agents. It was all a game to him. In fact, he simply told the agents to look for his victims near his travel routes and refused to be any more specific.
Israel Keys had no remorse at all. He enjoyed what he did. He talked about enjoying what he did. He talked about, had he not been caught, some of his future plans and what he would have done, which included continuing to do what he was doing, continuing to kidnap and murder people. So he had no remorse at all.
The FBI tried to map his movements from Anchorage, Vermont, Texas, Washington, New York, Arizona, and California. They did indeed recover many of these kill kits and a few victims, but unfortunately, many of the other victims remain unknown. Keys also admitted to 2 bank robberies, the 2009 Tupper Lake bank robbery, and the other one committed after Samantha's murder in Texas. On December 2nd, 2012, Keys was found dead in his Anchorage jail cell. He had slit his wrist with a razor and strangled himself with a bedsheet, but this was no act of regret. Next to him was a suicide note. It didn't even mention Samantha by name. It didn't mention any remorse. It was a haunting, poetic rambling about violence, demons, and his victim's final moments. Keys had used his own blood to draw 11 skulls, and the FBI suspected this photo that they released. Each skull resembled one victim of Keys. Unfortunately, only 3 of his victims have ever been confirmed. The rest seem to be still out there, just waiting to be discovered, because unfortunately, Keys took his secrets to the grave.
The tray that holds the animal in there, there's a perfect right thumbprint.
Yeah, right.
No, there is. I don't have the lab report.
Wow.